The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, written by Firefighter Raven. Usopp staggered back to his bunk with his meager rations. As usual, there was never enough, especially for the hard labor expected of them. Slaves died every day from too hard of work and inadequate food, but the humans always brought in more slaves. He was one of the last Vatai still alive in the slave labor camp. Of the 500 Vatai captured with him, only 17 were still alive. Accidents, starvation, disease, overwork, suicides, and murders took the rest. He only survived due to his will to survive long enough to see his family and these human monsters laid low. It had been 3 years by the human system of Feck since he had been kidnapped and brought here to mine metals for them. His mind wandered to how he got here. The humans were the first aliens the Vatai met. They never imagined the things they saw when the massive metal objects dropped from the stars. His people hadn't even mastered flight, let alone been to space. So when the humans offered them all these wonderful things, medicine, technology, and a chance to go to the stars, they foolishly believed them. They extended the hand of friendship, and when the Vatai did the same, they enclosed it in shackles. With their huge technology advantage, they could have easily conquered their planet by warfare, but that would have cost more money and ruined the resources they came for. But this method let them take the planet without firing a shot. Vatai that could prove to be a potential threat were asked to attend gatherings they claimed were meant to teach them to use one type of technology or another. Usopp had been offered the chance to learn more about operating new machines for construction. They were ushered into a large building for the presentation, but the door slammed shut once they all entered. All attempts to force the door failed, and then gas began filling the room. He tried to hold his breath as long as possible, but he soon passed out with the others. When he awoke, all 4 of his arms were shackled together and some sort of collar was around his neck. One of the others discovered it gave electric shocks when he tried to remove it. He was examining the surroundings when the door burst open, strong light temporarily blinding the captives, and humans storming in with sticks in their hands. They also gave shocks when touched to their hides. One of the Vatai attacked a guard by swinging his tail and breaking the human's neck. The humans just shot him, and then 5 others. They were told for every human killed by a Vatai, 5 of them would be executed. Deciding that wasn't enough to keep them in line, they also cut off half of the Vatai's tails, and they did it without sedation or numbing it. They were warned that they would cut more if they caused trouble. The humans announced that they were now the property of the Interstellar Imperium and would be labor for them. They promised freedom if you labored well for them. So he dug into a rock for metals they wanted. If that was what it took to get home to his family, then he would work hard. But after 6 months, it was obvious they lied. The only freedom from the camp was the freedom of the grave. As the ones that arrived at the camp with him died, more Vatai from all over the planet were brought in to replace them. Other aliens also began to be brought here, but they kept them separate buildings when not working. They didn't want either party to talk to each other. He once asked a guard why they were doing this, and the guard laughed. He said because they weren't human, and non-humans were only good for serving their betters. Every rotation they toiled away, and every day more and more slaves lost hope and died. But after Usopp's 4th year, he noticed something odd. Some of the old guards left, and some of the new guards that replaced them had healing injuries, or were missing a hand or an eye. Fewer and fewer aliens were being brought to the camp as well. The guards became more likely to use their shock batons than slaves. More slaves were publicly beaten for minor things. Some guards just shot slaves for the fun of it. It was obvious something was agitating the guards. Some of the slaves began to talk about rising and escaping, but Usopp advised against it. The guards were too jumpy and liable to kill everyone. He advised taking their time to prepare, and hopefully the guards would relax again. But they never got a chance to try. One morning, the guards said that they were getting a day off. Some of the newer slaves cheered, but Usopp and the other older slaves got nervous. This had never happened before. Something new was never a good thing. They said that it was one of their holidays and asked for 100 volunteers to help unload food from the train used to haul out the materials they dug and which sometimes brought in slaves. Half an hour later, the guards returned, but the 100 slaves did not. Usopp just happened to look down and spotted different colors of blood on the guards' boots. They asked for more volunteers, and when no one stepped forward, they just selected them. Usopp among them. They had the slaves form up in 2 lines and marched them out of the camp. They started marching them towards one of the quarries. A couple of the slaves balked, so the guards activated their collars and just left them on. The slaves screamed for what seemed like hours before dying. Another tried to escape and they gunned him down. They tried to reassure them that the rest of the slaves were safe if they behaved themselves. Usad's mind raced as it tried to think of an escape. He knew they weren't coming back from this. He was just turning to run for the trees when the sound of gunfire erupted. He heard a voice yell to drop to the ground. He barely noticed that it was in his language. He dropped to the ground and looked back, expecting to see the guards shooting at the slaves, but the guards were the ones being shot. He yelled for the others to hit the ground, but some were standing in shock. Many of those were shot and killed by the remaining guards. Again, that voice called out in his language and told them it was safe to stand up. But as he did, he realized the figures emerging from the trees were humans and cried out in despair. He looked at the guards, expecting them to get up and show it was a cruel joke on the slaves. And then that voice spoke again and told them to not be afraid. These humans were friends. Friends? Humans? Impossible. They were cruel, evil beings. It was then that he finally found the source of the voice. It was a young female with tie, wearing the markings of his people's religious leaders. His son shouted, "Humans aren't our friends. They have killed us, tortured us, and treated us like animals." He continued, "What trick is this? Have you turned against your people to serve them for better treatment?" But while he was talking, humans with a red sign and a white circle were moving among the slaves. Several other humans were looking over the edge of the quarry into the pit. The look on their face was anger. The priestess spoke to him. "I am Celeran of the Garaneth Order, and I swear by my life that what I say is true." She continued, "Humans are not all the same, but come from another tribe. They call this other tribe the Terran Union, and they are at war with our oppressors." She looked around as she spoke. "They fought them across the stars for many cycles, and when they found out about our world and how they enslaved us, they came here to defeat them and set us free." Usad shouted again, "Humans lie! How do you know they aren't lying to you?" The priestess turned around and removed the wrap around her neck. It was scarred and burned in spots at the right distance for the heated collars. She turned to face all of the slaves so they could see it too. "I was a prisoner on another planet, and the humans freed me," she continued. "They have been on our world for the last 25 rotations. They've been fighting our oppressors and driving them back from our homes. They freed a couple other camps like this." Usad noticed some of the humans look angry when she mentioned the camps. Others showed that what he would later learn was sorrow. Salaran's voice got softer, and you could hear the regret and sadness in her voice. "We were too late in another. They killed them all, so we couldn't free them. It was the humans that said that we needed to rescue all the other slaves before they killed everyone." She inclined her head towards the quarry. "But we weren't quick enough to save you all." Usad spoke in a normal tone. What about the camp?" Celeran looked at one of the humans, and it nodded its head. Usad had learned that gesture meant yes. Celeran addressed the others. "They have freed the camp too. You are free, my friends." As it finally sunk in, all the slaves began to cheer and dance. Some were brave enough to approach the humans and embrace them. Usad walked to the lip of the quarry. A couple of humans made room for him. He'd hoped that he would be wrong about what made the humans react that way, but it was as he feared. The first group of slaves were dead, gunned down by the gods. As he watched, some of the humans were moving among these dead people. At first, he didn't understand, but when one yelled and waved to some others, he realized they were looking for survivors. Another of the humans with a white circle and a red mark ran over, a medic, they called them, and began examining the survivor. Other humans were moving the dead bodies from the piles and laying them out in a line. They seemed particularly gentle as they did. He began to believe these humans were different. One of the humans next to him turned and said something. Usad didn't understand, but then he saw the human was holding out some food. It took all of Usad's willpower not to gobble it down in one bite. Both humans had huge smiles on their faces. The other gave him some water, food and water, and had never tasted so good in his life. 8 months later, Usad sat in his seat, staring at the floor and remembering when he was a slave. He was brought out of his thoughts by a voice next to him asking a question. "Usad, you're all right. Are you still with us? It's time to go." Usad looked up and smiled. "Just fine, Eddie." Usad adjusted his helmet and grabbed his weapon before following his human battle buddy down the ramp. They had another labor camp to free. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.